Former federal prosecutor, the president of West Coast Trial Lawyers. Okay, Neama, so we did just hear there at the end from Caroline saying that it may take a few weeks if the Supreme Court takes up this case, but are they going to do that?
Correll, I fully expect the Supreme Court to hear this case. It's not an if, it's a matter of when. You're talking about a matter of extreme constitutional importance, whether President Trump, former President Trump, can be President Trump again. He can appear on the presidential ballot. And you have inconsistent decisions all over the country. I mean, we talked about Colorado and Maine, but there's cases that have been decided in Michigan, Minnesota. There's a case pending in Oregon. And the reason is we're talking about a more than 100-year-old Civil War era amendment that really hasn't been applied. So the question is, who applies it and how is it applied? And the judges and secretaries of state that have considered it so far have come up with very inconsistent decisions. So we need the Supreme Court to step in and decide this matter once and for all.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought up that point that this clause that they're trying to invoke, I mean, this is back in the Civil War era. A long time ago, and now we're trying to bring it back here, modern times. So if you don't mind just telling us some of the difficulties that states are going to face when trying to successfully argue the insurrection clause, when trying to keep Trump out, and maybe some of the difficulties that Trump's legal team is also going to face.
We all know what the Fourth Amendment says. It says that if you engage in an insurrection, you can't hold federal public office. It's just that simple. But the question is, how is it enforced? So you hear constitutional scholars and law professors and lawyers like myself. Some will say it's self-executing. Some will say that it requires Congress to step in and do something, actually impeach the former president. And of course, we know that although Donald Trump was impeached by the House, he was acquitted by the Senate. And others have said, well, it requires a criminal conviction. And despite Donald Trump's criminal problems in multiple jurisdictions, he's never been charged, much less convicted of an insurrection. And of course, others believe that it's a decision that a Secretary of State can make. That's what's happening in Maine. Or a judge can make. And that's what happened in Colorado. So the Supreme Court really needs to give us some guidance. Who decides whether someone engages in an insurrection or not? Because, although Trump may have engaged in election fraud and those are the allegations, we're talking about conduct related to January 6th. And it's a lot further removed from actually taking up arms against the United States government. At least that's what Trump and his lawyers are saying.
So do you think based off of these two arguments, almost Trump has the upper hand then, so to speak, in this case?
I really do. Trump has a lot of paths to victory before the Supreme Court. We all know that it's a 6-3 conservative majority, and as we discussed, 3 of those justices were appointed by Trump himself. But the justices can say that this is something that is a political issue to be decided by Congress, or it requires a criminal conviction, or this is something that really is disenfranchising millions of voters that really should make the decision at the ballot box. There's even prominent Democrats like Gavin Newsom, the governor of my state, that believes that this is something that should be put to the voters and not necessarily something that should be decided by unelected judges or Secretary of State who are elected. But really, what you're talking about is a political decision and not a legal one, because it's certainly not clear-cut that Trump engaged in an insurrection.
It's really quite the times that we live in right now, and all this is all snowballed even into 2024, the election year. So one more question, Neama. If, let's say the court doesn't reach a decision, because caucuses are already underway, are these states that want to bar Trump from the ballot, are they going to keep that decision in place if they choose to go that route? Or is this something that just can't be implemented until we get a decision from the higher-ups?
I think so. Obviously, each case is on its own timeline. Colorado is the furthest along, but what the Colorado Supreme Court did is they actually paused their decision as well. They said, well, look, we're going to pause it. If the Supreme Court steps in, well, they'll make a decision. But if they don't, that pause or stay isn't going to be indefinite. Trump will be kept off the ballot. Now, Maine is a newer case, and what happened there was an administrative process. So now Trump is appealing to a state law judge there who's going to have to decide this issue, and it's going to have to go through the Maine courts as well. So there's always a process. So it's going to be a Maine trial court, then a Maine appellate court. The Maine Supreme Court can decide whether to step in or not, like the Colorado Supreme Court, and then the U.S. Supreme Court would get involved. But what the Supreme Court may do, if and when, and I fully believe when they decide to hear these cases, is to consolidate all of them, because really we're talking about the same issue. Now, each state's election laws are a little bit different. Some require candidates, for instance, to certify that they're constitutionally eligible, or secretaries of state to confirm that they are. But really, we're talking about the interpretation of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. So whatever the Supreme Court decides is going to apply to all 50 states. And I think it will answer this question once and for all.
And, you know, all eyes are going to be on the lookout for that answer. Neama Rahmani, former federal prosecutor, president of West Coast Trial Lawyers. Always a pleasure to have you here at Live Now from Fox. Again, Happy New Year. And we'll talk to you soon, because this is going to continue, it seems.
Oh, there's no question. Thanks for having me, Carl.
All right, everyone, I want you to stick with us here at Live Now from Fox, because we have so many other stories to get to. But first, a live look out of Denver, Colorado, of course, one of those states that is trying to keep former President Trump off the 2024 primary ballot. All of those updates, developments, you can catch them here, where we will also bring experts to break down this series of complicated events. We're going to step away for another quick break. We'll see you back here in 2 minutes.